Hello, and welcome to another episode in the monthly online program series by Les Dames d'Escoffier, Washington, D.C. Regional Chapter. I am Sheila Cry, President of the Board of Directors this year. Our chapter is a nonprofit charitable organization with the missions of education, mentoring, and philanthropy. Since our founding in 1981, we have raised funds to give $500,000 in grants and scholarships to benefit women in food, beverage, and associated professions in the Mid-Atlantic region. This particular online program is free of charge, but you can support our grants and scholarship programs by donating via our website, lesdamesdc.org. The DC chapter is one of 42 chapters of Les Dames d'Escoffier International, established in 1976. Today's program is one of 6 table talks this year. These are programs from different chapters of the umbrella organization. For more information, see ldei.org. Can what you eat make a difference in how well you age? That is a question that will be considered now by 3 of our chapter's expert dietitians who are experienced in senior nutrition: Rose Clifford, Sheryl Hoehner, and Paulette Thompson. Each speaker will introduce herself and Rose will moderate the panel discussion. Please keep your microphone muted and type your questions in the chat box. And now, please welcome Rose Clifford.
Good evening, all, and thank you for joining us tonight to talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I know Sheryl and Stephanie's, as I'm Sheryl and Paulette's as well. Our format tonight is to do just very brief introductions for ourselves, and then we'll each speak for about 12 to 15 minutes on our particular topic of expertise in this area. And then we'll have time for questions as we go. If you want to write your questions in the chat, we'll try to get to as many as we can. And I also wanted to add today that today is actually National Registered Dietitian Nutritionist Day. So it's perhaps fitting that we're here tonight to talk about this, this evening. Sheryl and Paulette and I have been registered dietitians for a collective total of over 120 years, I think we figured out. So I guess obviously we're in the category of older adult ourselves. Let's see, we did 3 handouts were mailed out to everybody, so you should have those. They were sent as attachments, but if necessary, after I finish speaking, I can always pop them in the chat. There's a resource guide and then 2 informational sheets on the mind diet eating pattern. So I'm going to introduce myself briefly, and then Sheryl and Paulette will tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll get into the meat of the program. So I've been a registered dietitian for more than 4 decades, holding various roles throughout my career. I've been with Iona Senior Services in Tenleytown, DC for about 15 years now, and I'm actually retiring at the end of June from Iona. I'm in my current role, I'm a senior nutrition advisor, and I work on grants, food and nutrition security advocacy, and some client work. All of my clients are food insecure, community-based older adults, and I primarily help link them to appropriate food resources so they can maximize their own nutritional situation. Just a fun fact Sheryl and I wanted to share was that we met when I was about 17 or 18 and a freshman dietetic student at the University of Maryland, and Sheryl was a research nutritionist at USDA's Human Study Facility in Beltsville. And we worked together. I was a student working part-time, obviously, for 5 years on human nutrition studies, and then we've been friends ever since. So, Sheryl?
Okay, thanks, Rose. As you mentioned, we've been in practice for a while. My work started at the USDA where we met as a research dietitian. And then I have had a career for over 22 years in the U.S. Army. One of my favorite assignments was my time at the Naval Academy as their dietitian in King Hall. I've also, spanning my entire career, worked as a grocery store dietitian where we do classes and help individuals shop. And that's where I reacquainted my friendship with Paulette. We met as grad students, and then she hired me to work in a couple of her giant grocery stores, which was tremendously fun. Currently, I work with a few senior assisted living facilities in Maryland and Virginia, and also have my own private practice where I counsel individuals.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. Hi, everyone. I'm Paulette Thompson, and I too am a registered dietitian nutritionist, although retired, happy to say, um, and have a graduate degree from the University of Maryland College Park, where, yes, I had the pleasure of meeting Sheryl. I started my career with the supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children, and then moved to the other end of the life cycle and worked at the Prince George's County Department of Aging. But I spent the bulk of my career, 20 years, working in the supermarket industry, a career I really loved and enabled me to learn about all aspects of food. And then I went to public health again, and I worked again with the supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children in DC. And I'm going to indulge myself and say, I am so thrilled my former boss is in the audience. So in retirement, most of my volunteer work involves food and nutrition. That's what I love, and including being treasurer of the local DC chapter of LADAM.
I guess it's now you know a little bit of something about us. So I'm gonna speak first, and before we get to the wellness bit, which is what Sheryl and Paulette are going to talk about, I'd like to set the stage or the table, if you will, about senior nutrition. And the government, for government program purposes in the senior nutrition programs, this is 60 and above. So, you know, mere children, really. So here are some facts. Senior nutrition is very big in the, senior malnutrition is very big in the United States. DC's current ranking is number 3 in the nation. There's an annual Senior Hunger in America report, and the last one was released April of 2023. There should be another one being released next month, and so we'll have to see where our DC and Maryland and our regional states are. But DC is just behind Louisiana and Mississippi. There is a healthy eating index, and about 83% of older adults don't consume a healthy eating pattern, and about 87% of older adults have one or more chronic diseases with nutritional implications. And why is this? Well, what we see is that it's multifactorial. People, as they age, they may have a poor appetite, unintentional weight loss, and physical frailty, which is actually one of the biggest nutritional issue I work with my older adults. Something called sarcopenia, which is the age-related loss of lean muscle mass, strength, and function that happens to everyone as we age, starting in our 40s, I believe. There are a lot of psychosocial and mental health challenges that older adults face, as well as isolation, poor oral health, cognitive decline, to name a few. It's a pretty big list. It all kind of boils down to access issues. It's just anything, I define that as anything that interferes with an older adult's ability to plan, procure, prepare, and consume adequate meals and snacks. There's a lot of hidden hunger in older adults. So you could have functional declines. Lack of transportation is a big one. And even though you should know the majority of seniors do have incomes above the poverty line, which isn't saying very much because the poverty line is really low, like $14,000 a year or something. Not all food insecurity is financial. One study by the National Foundation to End Senior Hunger cited about 30% of all senior malnutrition as not being financial. I actually saw this in my own mother as she started to decline. And in the last year, she lived alone by herself after my father died. She lost 11 pounds, you know, despite having a dietitian daughter living down the street and trying to supervise her meals and food and things like that. So it's just a very challenging problem. this is a very impressive fact I like to share, and it's that marginal food insecurity or facing the threat of hunger is functionally equivalent to being 14 years older, which means that if you're 70 and you experience food insecurity, you could be functioning at the level of an 84-year-old. And so what is marginal food insecurity? And it really is when people have a concern that their food would run out before being able to afford more. This is something that typically happens to a lot of low-income people and older adults as you get in towards the, the middle towards the end of the month. They really don't have any more money to buy any more resources to buy more food. And then you start to see disrupted eating patterns, which results in reduced food intake, such as skipping meals to allow others, if you have others in your household, like particularly children, to have the food. The goal of senior nutrition programs that are available is to improve not just the food situation for adults, but to improve their quality of life, their health, and their well-being. Ultimately, access to these various nutrition programs reduces people's risk of isolation, hospitalization, institutionalization, and all of those things that many old adults face. There are quite a few programs and services available for older adults. There are federal programs such as SNAP, which is formerly known as food stamps, although nobody knows what SNAP is really. We still call it food stamps. I will share with you the benefits are quite low. Many of my clients would have incomes below $1,000 a month. The Medicaid minimum is about $800 a month. And once you've taken about a third of that for your subsidized housing, you still are only eligible for about $60 a month in SNAP. So you can see how that's like really barely a bag of groceries these days. And so there are other farm programs, the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, which offers a box of like 35 pound box of shelf stable food items, including some protein items, but generally the box has to be picked up, which is hard for seniors that have no transportation and can't heft the 35 pound box. In DC, there is limited home delivery. That's something I find that's really necessary in all senior programs for many people, is that programs need to be, there needs to be more home delivery of of resources for seniors who actually can't travel to go get things themselves. A lot of these programs are funded through the Older Americans Act, senior nutrition programs, where all states participate, counties participate. Most counties, or all counties, will have a Department on Aging, and usually the programs are coordinated through your local Department on Aging. So if either you or someone you know or take care of or are concerned about, that's a good place to start, is to look up your local Department on Aging and see what kind of senior nutrition programs they have. There are programs for there are home delivered types of programs, and there are also senior wellness centers scattered throughout. DC has quite a lot of senior wellness centers where it's not just a meal, it's actually mandated to provide socialization, wellness activities. I actually moderated one of Iona's wellness activities today, which was a cooking demonstration by Danielle Cook, who is a lovely provider we have. She's actually on this present. She's in the audience in this presentation. So we really do, make an effort to provide vibrant programming to connect seniors to their community, to others, to information, and to tangibles, such as meals. And there are community dining sites that operate Monday through Friday where people can go and have a meal. And all of these programs are free to the seniors. Most seniors have to cobble together programs to meet their needs. There really isn't a one-stop shopping for older adults who need nutrition support and services. There are various private programs. There are local nonprofits who step up to meet needs, such as, for example, in DC Greens. And DC Greens is a nonprofit in DC that has a contract to, I think they're still doing a Produce Plus program. So in the summertime, there could be programs that pop up that to help seniors have access to fresh produce. There's the Capital Area Food Bank, which of course is doesn't distribute food directly, although they do operate the commodity supplemental food program in DC, but they tend to have partners in the community that they provide food for. In Van Ness, DC, during the pandemic, a fantastic group. Now they're called the Northwest Community Food Pantry. Every Sunday, they serve anywhere from 225 to 280 families or individuals with fresh produce, as well as prepared foods. They glean from everywhere. Wegmans, Call Your Mother Bagels, all kinds of places donate to them. They have a very sophisticated, organized system. It's wonderful to volunteer for them. They do home deliveries for certain seniors. And so they really, many people really rely on their offerings. And you just show up Sunday. They start handing things out at 1 o'clock, but many people show up at noon to get sort of a number. So there's all these sort of community resources that is very helpful to look into to help yourself if you need it, or other older adults that you know or want to help. There are villages, the village movement, and Paulette is going to talk about that. She's actually very active in her local village, which is a neighbors helping neighbors type of situation. And local village nonprofits generally have some type of nutrition programs. The Woodley Park Village is one of the villages in DC, and they actually have their own small home delivered meals program for members in their community who have a need. They don't have to be seniors. They just have, maybe they're ill or something. They have a need for home delivered meals. And they even have a little, like a pantry on the corner in a specific location that's open. One final point I want to make in my time I have is that there's one trend in older adult nutrition programs is the food as medicine, or the FIM trend or movement, which links food and nutrition programs and services to health outcomes, which ultimately seeking to control healthcare costs through data. Some local examples for us here in DC would be Food and Friends, which offers tens of thousands, about hundreds of thousands of medically tailored meals and groceries annually to qualified participants who meet their criteria. They have chronic disease programs, but they started out offering medically tailored meals. This is decades ago when the HIV and AIDS first came about and was basically a terminal condition. And they focused on providing meals at that time to people with terminal illnesses. And then they sort of evolved to serving people with terminal cancer. And then they've evolved to serving people that just have a need for medically tailored meals or groceries. And there are even healthcare organizations that are getting involved now, such as Kaiser and others, who will send what we call transitional meals home when people are leaving from a prolonged period in the hospital or a rehab facility, so that they don't go home to an empty house with nothing to eat or rotten food in the refrigerator from the last time they were there, so that they can avoid a hospital readmission as well as, get back on their feet. Let's see. And there's one company that does provide these kind of transitional meals that's on your research, that's on your resource guide. They're called Mom's Meals. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sheryl, who's going to be our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Rose. You did a beautiful job. You and Paulette have told me I get to do all the fun stuff, but I disagree. I've learned so much from both of your presentations. It's been really, really good. I have a big task, fitting years of knowledge on nutrition into just a few minutes. I've given it a lot of thought, and I've tried to distill it down to some things that I hope you'll find fascinating, with the main focus on nutrition and exercise tonight, as they are both critical to good health. I will begin with a story. In 2016, some exciting new research came out, and the ramifications were so impressive that I couldn't wait to go down to my senior facility in Salisbury and let them know about some of these findings. So I showed up and we did a class and made some do-it-yourself trail mix and made some strawberry smoothies while I discussed these new findings. 3 months later, when I came back to see them, I was greeted by a group of them, and they told me they were now choosing their menus differently and feeling really good about their new choices, and asked if I would do a class when I came back 3 months later. And as a dietitian, I say to myself, that's worth getting out of bed. That's exciting when people really want to take what you teach and then and actually personalize it. So I will be starting off tonight with some historical information, as I believe thinking about where we come from is really helpful. And then I'll discuss some research findings and then go on to some practical ideas. So we know, as Rose mentioned, several thousand years ago, Hippocrates, who was the father of medicine, said food is medicine, and how right he was. But I think the thing that's really exciting to think about is it wasn't until the early 1900s that we discovered vitamins and minerals. And so in the last 100 years, the knowledge base that we have has just grown exponentially. It's very exciting. This recent knowledge has majorly increased our understanding of health and disease. And now we're able to conduct huge population studies where they go on for 5 to 10 years and even longer. So we study how people age. And one of the latest frontiers is now brain health, which is what I'm going to talk mostly about tonight. So during the time the three of us have been in private practice, the scientific community has given us so much through all the research that's being conducted. And we've also been working during the time that guidance has changed. And sometimes that's been frustrating because people will say to us, our clients will say to us, oh, come on, you just told us yesterday you need to restrict that. And now tomorrow you're telling us it's okay. You think about eggs. Well, 20 or 30 years ago, we were asking people to limit eggs to a couple times a week. And now we know that eggs and the cholesterol they contain, you don't need to be limiting so much unless you really have a serious lipid situation. So, but a lot of the change is due to the new research that comes out. So we have to react to that when we make our recommendations. So, but with all the changes over the years with the nutrition guidance, the three of us have always recommended a plant-based diet, and that's one that will stand the test of time. The first eating plan that I want to discuss is the DASH diet, which stands for Dietary Approach to Stopping Hypertension. This plan came about after 2 key studies were conducted back in the 90s. And the findings showed that blood pressure actually came down pretty rapidly when people started on these diet plans that are low in saturated fat, total fat, and cholesterol, but include whole grains, fish, poultry, and nuts, while reducing lean meat, sweets, and added sugars. And I want to also mention that when we talk, we don't specifically like to talk about diet because that sends people into a frenzy thinking they have to restrict something. So generally we'll talk about meal plans or meal patterns. So plans and patterns rather than diet. You'll hear me say diet, but when I say that, it's because something has been named that way. So the second plan is the Mediterranean diet, which was first published in 1975 or talked about by Ansel Keys. And then not much happened with that until the 90s when numerous studies showed that it also had a positive effect on reducing the risk for cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. This dietary approach is similar, but it more emphasizes a plant-based diet focusing on unprocessed cereals and legumes and vegetables, olive oil, fruit, and then a small amount of dairy and fish and some lean protein, lean red meat. These 2 patterns, DASH and the Mediterranean, are both recommended in the dietary guidelines that our country produces and in the latest dietary guidelines. Then in 2016, the MIND diet came on the scene. And when I asked a few friends recently, I was surprised how many people hadn't heard of it. I wish I could ask for a show of hands because I only see a few faces here tonight. But when I first learned about it, I was skeptical. After all,
Cheryl,
yeah.
Cheryl, excuse me, you can ask for a show of hands. Everybody, you can raise your hand. If you put your cursor on the bottom of your screen, you'll see an icon that says raise hand.
Okay. So how many have heard of the MIND diet? 2 participants raise their hands. Oh, 3. Okay, so you're going to be in for a treat tonight. when I first learned, as I said, all dietitians are skeptical of new things because we take our science seriously and are suspicious if something sounds too good to be true, which this certainly did sound too good to be true. So let me tell you what I've learned. The MIND diet targets the health of the aging brain, which is a topic of intense interest, as dementia is the 6th leading cause of death in our country. And according to the Center for Disease Control, Americans are twice as afraid of losing cognitive skills as losing physical abilities, especially their memory. I think we can all relate to that. This MIND research began in 1993. As you noticed, a lot of these things are in the 90s that we have majorly learned from. Dr. Martha Claire Morris started her career at Rush University in Chicago, and she was involved in a study that focused on the risk factors that contribute to Alzheimer's disease. The study followed more than 10,000 people over 20 years. So this was a long time that they were looking at these folks. And Dr. Morris was interested in the diet part. No one had been looking at that thus far. So she was able to get funding, and they were able to start collecting nutrition data because she suspected that there was a link between diet and dementia. The study was called CHAP, which stands for Chicago Health and Aging Project. And this study was pivotal in examining diet in relationship to dementia. Then in 1997, a second study was conducted, again in Chicago, where they looked extensively, doing lots and lots of cognition tests on over 1,800 people in retirement communities. And this was called MAP, the Memory Aging Project. From these two studies, the team uncovered key nutrients: vitamin B12, vitamin E, folate, DHA, which is a type of omega-3 fatty acid, and unsaturated fats that were shown to have the biggest effects on the brain. Taking this information from these two studies, she got extensive funding to conduct a randomized controlled trial to test her findings. This was a huge step because the others were all observational studies. Since the Mediterranean and the DASH diets had already been shown to decrease risk for the cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and diabetes, they decided to use the two diets plus incorporate the findings that they had from the MAP and the CHAP studies. They took the best of Mediterranean and the best of DASH, and they called it the Mediterranean DASH Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay Diet, or MIND. That's a big mouthful, isn't it? The research team recruited more than 1,000 older adults for this study, none of whom had dementia. No one had dementia when they started looking at them. And again, from senior facilities all across Chicago. For 9 years, these participants filled out an annual dietary survey. And during the 9 years, they did 2 cognitive assessments. The team from that research developed a MIND diet score to identify foods and nutrients that are included or related to cognitive decline and dementia. Their results produced 15 dietary components that they classified as either healthy or unhealthy, but as dietitians, we like to say limited, foods to be limited. Now listen, this is what gets really exciting. The participants with the highest MIND scores had a significantly slower decline in dementia and cognition compared to those with the lowest scores. This is huge news. They learned this way of eating was keeping the aging brain 7.5 years younger. 7.5 years younger. Research found 53% lower rate of Alzheimer's disease for those who followed the principles most closely, with scores between 8.5 and 12.5. So they out of 15. So they weren't even achieving the total 15. They found those who moderately followed the principles, their scores were 7.5, 7 to 8 out of 15, and they realized a 35% lower risk compared to those who minimally followed either 0 to 6.5, and they had no risk, no reduced risk. This means if you're only able to follow half of the recommendations, you'll still lower your risk. I'm sure you will agree that this is life-changing. Knowing this, who wouldn't want to make some of these changes? Amazingly, the results didn't change after the research team adjusted for factors associated. We already know these factors affect dementia, and they are elevated blood pressure, stroke, diabetes, depression, and obesity. Whether or not following the MIND diet over long periods of time can slow cognition continues to be investigated. As you will remember, this started in 1997, and they were producing these findings in 2016, which is very recently. Since I've learned about these amazing findings, I've worked hard to incorporate these healthy foods into my usual meal pattern while decreasing the unhealthy ones. These changes are pretty easy to make. After all, if I have the potential to slow down the possibility of dementia for myself and my family and friends, this is a no-brainer, no pun intended. The foods also contain antioxidants and phytochemicals, which contribute many other known benefits. And again, keep in mind, it doesn't have to be adhered to perfectly, which is astounding. Since it's only 10 foods or groups to include and 5 to cut back on, it's surprisingly easy to remember. Many of our listeners, as I look out at the screen tonight, are restaurant or bakery owners or even cookbook writers. Please consider this information when you write your recipes and create your menus. This will help keep your customers more sharply minded and coming back in for more of the delicious foods that you offer in your facilities. Now let's review what these foods are. Sheila, do you want to share the screen? I think some of you have printed this handout out.
I will.
Okay. As I go through the list, think if these are part of your usual dietary pattern. These are the 10 healthy foods. Can you move the screen up so you can see the bottom? There we go. Great. Okay. So you see things to incorporate into your diet are green leafy vegetables, at least 6 a day. I'm sorry, 6 a week. If you think about having a green leafy salad every day, that is one of those foods groups that you want to include. Then have at least one other vegetable. Have 5 servings or more of nuts a week, 2 or more servings of berries a week, beans at least 3 servings a week, whole grains 3 or more servings a day, and that's the same as the dietary guideline recommendation. Fish at least once a week, poultry 2 servings a week, and olive oil used in cooking and dressings, and wine, especially red. Now they did take the wine off of the when they are doing the studies now, because they had some issues, and for safety reasons. We all know that alcohol use should be based on one's own personal and family history, as it may offer different individuals either a range of benefits or risks. The MIND diet does stress that 5 ounces is the goal to give benefits, and if too much or too little didn't provide additional benefits. Okay, Sheila, you can close that. Wait, I'm sorry, no, don't close it. We want to talk about the things to limit. But if you're not going to be drinking, it's not recommended. If you don't drink, it's not recommended that you start drinking. And other foods are helpful, and they would be grape juice, pomegranate, and cranberry, because they also have the antioxidant qualities. Now, the 5 things to limit are red meat, less than 4 servings a week, butter and margarine, that's stick margarine, not soft, less than a teaspoon a day, cheese, less than a serving a week, and they recommend 2 ounces in that serving per week, pastries and sweets, less than 5 servings a week, and fried or fast foods, less than 1 serving a week. Okay, and I see one question, what kinds of fish are recommended? Yes, salmon and tuna, albacore tuna are 2 that are highly recommended. And we know that, I'm sorry, those questions popping up are getting a little distracting, because we should save those, shouldn't we? Okay, so if you want to close that, that would be helpful. All right, so the reason the MIND diet team recommended reducing these foods is due to the higher amounts of saturated and trans fats in these foods. Plus, some of the foods are also very high in simple sugars. Dietitians like to give more information so that people and use some basic rules of thumb to decide how much of a food or how often to include that, rather than just eliminating it. As dietitians, we like to say, all foods can fit in moderation. These are the recommendations also from the American Heart Association and the dietary guidelines to keep your intake of saturated fat less than 16 grams per day for women, and at limited added sugars to less than 12 teaspoons, which is 50 grams per day. So with those two facts right there, the amount of saturated fat and the amounts of simple sugars, that can help you decide, that maybe you would rather use your saturated fat grams per day to include more cheese. A lot of people, when I mention that, especially as a food, kind of look at me and go, "Are you serious?" I love cheese. That's so little. But again, if you know the facts of how much saturated fat you're looking at, and also remember that it doesn't have to be followed perfectly, okay, to be successful. Okay, in meal planning, how do we use these MIND principles? The MIND diet does not offer meal plans to follow, but offers the flexibility of choosing certain foods or groups while avoiding others. So we believe as dietitians, the best way to plan is to use the My Plate. And we have that also in a link in the resource guide. It can be a little hard to find things on that My Plate site, but they've got a wealth of information. So you click in there and you see Alexa, click on that, and then it will take you, if you scroll on down, to a place where you can click in and put in your age, your height, your weight, and your activity level. And it will spit out a plan for you that looks like this. Sorry, this is kind of old school, just to show this to you. Oh, you can't see it, can you? Or can you? This is my plan from the USDA My Plate website, and it was personalized for me. So it tells me that I should aim for 2.5 cups of vegetables per day. So with that in mind, I would choose a green leafy salad every day, and then also choose one or more vegetables. Okay, so you can see that the quantities recommended in My Plate are greater than the MIND principles. Okay, so another thing to keep in mind is you don't just want to take and incorporate those 10 healthy foods on top of your diet, because if you did that, you'd be adding somewhere between 600 and 800 extra calories. So you want to be looking at what you're doing, and then I don't want to say mindfully choose, but you do want to carefully choose those foods that you want to add in to your usual pattern. We've also included a MIND tracker handout in our resources, and I had my daughter design that. I have to give a shout out to my beautiful daughter, Carolyn, for creating that for me, because I couldn't find anything that I thought was especially easy to actually do the scoring. And I was able to use the handout she made to go ahead and just fill that out, and then see that my score was not as high as I would like it. So I'll continue to work to make that even better. Here's an example of one of my favorite lunches. I love chicken salad. So I make it with low-fat mayonnaise, the one with olive oil, and also use some Greek yogurt. And then I put in some dried cherries and put it on toasted whole wheat bread. And then add a arugula salad with some veggies and some toasted pecans on top. And then dressed with some olive oil vinaigrette. And then a few grapes on the side. So that would be 7 of the MIND foods just in that one simple lunch, which is delicious and easy to make, isn't it? So I hope I've given you some good food for thought today. Other issues to consider when thinking about nutrition in senior years are the following, and some of these Rose already mentioned. Sometimes older people have additional need for protein, plus their food choices often don't have enough variety because of many issues, including poor dentition, perceived expense for proteins, and difficulty in food prep. The goal should be protein at each meal, and sometimes that doesn't happen. So that is the goal. Many seniors tire of cooking, and then they choose quick meals such as canned soups and cereals and frozen dinners and frozen pizzas, many of which don't contain the adequate protein that I just mentioned, and also maybe high in sodium. Those are all very high in sodium, which is another issue, because we all know as we age, our ability to remember to drink diminishes. And as you age, you can be easily dehydrating yourself by not taking in enough fluids. So that can be making things worse if your usual pattern is high in sodium. Another concern can be sleep cycles. They change often as people age, and sometimes people stay up very late at night and then sleep in and miss that morning meal, which has a lot of the nutrition that we just talked about. So they also tend to eat more sweets and drink more sugary drinks. I see a lot of this at the senior centers that I consult for. That fills them up, and then it limits the healthy things that we know that they should be eating. All right, we're going to switch gears and talk about exercise now. There are 4 important types of exercise and physical activity that are critical for all ages, but especially as we age: endurance or aerobic, strength training, balance training, and also flexibility. We really lose our ability to be flexible and maintain our balance as we age. As Rose alluded to earlier, when we don't take enough protein and we're not moving enough, our muscle mass declines, putting us at risk for falling. So we want to really make sure that we are doing both in tandem. We're eating well and getting the protein we need, and getting the aerobic and the other forms of activity that are so important, because this will really help seniors age better and be able for them to stay independent longer. Despite proven health benefits, exercise and physical activity rates remain particularly low in the senior age group and also among other adults. Only about 30% of people between 45 and 65 engage in regular physical activity. That's shocking, isn't it? Of those 65 years of age and older, only about 17% of women meet the federal guidelines for strength and muscle back in 2020, only 17%. And of those people over 85, only 11% say they're still active. So this is something we really want to motivate our senior friends, as well as our friends and family, to work on. The really cool thing, though, that we do know from research, and we've known this for a long time, since I began my practice, is that it's never too late to regain and build muscle mass. We've seen people who are in wheelchairs or not able to get out of bed, with some simple weight training over 8 to 10 weeks, be able to be up and on their feet again. So that's really encouraging. That was not known before that. What was it, Rose and Paulette, maybe 40 years ago? We didn't know that. There are many wonderful resources available, which we've included in the resource handout. So please take a look at that. One of my favorites is the National Institute on Aging, which has a tremendous amount of really good information. Their website is easy to navigate and has this book as an ebook. Can you see that? This book is amazing. It has activities to do. It has actual photographs of people. It also has a lot of healthy diet information in it. So I would highly recommend that you give that to friends and family and download it for yourself. I just want to thank you for your time tonight. I can tell by looking at your faces, everybody's been engaging, which I love. And we hope that you will use the tools we have given tonight to make positive tweaks to your eating pattern. Now we'll go to Paulette and learn about the villages. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheryl. Thanks, Rose. And once again, it's nice to see so many people here. So in my talk, I'm going to circle back to talk about some of the barriers to healthy eating for seniors that Rose talked about. And I'm going to focus, as you heard, on how villages can help. As I mentioned in my bio, I spent a large part of my career in the supermarket industry. In that capacity, I developed and managed programs that assisted customers or consumers with grocery shopping and identifying healthy choices in the stores. Now, in retirement, I am enjoying actively assisting people with grocery shopping as a volunteer for my village. So to start, what are villages? As Rose said, villages are neighbors helping neighbors. Villages are community-based, nonprofit, grassroots organizations formed through a cadre of caring neighbors who want to change the paradigm of aging. The first village was established in 1999 in Boston with the Beacon Hill Village. By 2022, the movement had grown to over 250 villages across the US. And in your resource list, there is a link to the Village to Village network where you can locate villages throughout the country. There are quite a few, over 50, in fact, right here in the DC area. Rose mentioned the Woodley Park one. And I'm a volunteer for my local community, which is the Cheverly in Prince George's County. So why this proliferation of villages? Well, first, the US has a growing aging population, as we probably all know. From 2010 to 2020, the 65 plus population experienced its largest ever 10-year gain, an increase of 15.5 million people. And it is expected that as baby boomers age, the 75 and older population will continue to increase at a fast rate. Two, many seniors live alone. Roughly 1 in 3 people older than 65 live alone, and half of those over 85 live alone. Third, more seniors want to stay in their homes as long as they can. A 2021 AARP survey found that more than 3/4 of adults ages 50 and older want to stay in their homes as they age. And staying in their home is a more economically efficient model for aging. Senior communities, assisted living facilities, skilled nursing facilities are expensive. Medicare does not pay towards assisted living and only pays for limited times in a skilled nursing facility. And even when people are ready to make a move to a senior living community, there's often waiting lists to get in. They may not be able to do it as quickly as they think they would like to. And when this is the case, villages can provide the help people need until they are able to move. So how are villages structured? While each village is different and reflects the needs of its own members and community, villages share many common characteristics. They're run by volunteers, but they may have paid staff. They charge for membership, so they're not free services. However, they have sliding scales based on income and do not turn anyone away due to lack of funds. In our village, we have many members that join before they need services. They join to support the village, and as I have heard from more than one member, they want to pay forward, knowing that at some point they may need the village, which is a great thing to do. So villages coordinate access to affordable services, including transportation, health and wellness programs, technology support, home repairs, social and educational activities. They offer access to vetted service providers. They positively impact isolation, health, and purpose. They serve as one-stop shopping for the services members need to age safely and successfully in their own homes. And they form linkages with community partners to help address the challenges of aging. By providing these services, villages are well positioned to improve the population health of the communities they serve and can help mitigate many of the factors that Rose talked about that can negatively impact the nutritional status of seniors. So going into a little more detail on that, first is access to food. Villages can offer assistance with grocery shopping. They can offer referrals to local services such as Meals on Wheels. They can offer transportation to senior nutrition congregate meal programs. They can offer technical assistance with online food ordering. Another thing villages can do is help in preparation of food. Villages can coordinate meal trains, even coordinate and offer cooking demos and classes. Villages can also offer talks on healthy eating and wellness and include dietitians and nutritionists in their lists of vetted providers. And by providing transportation to medical providers, seniors may visit their providers more frequently and consequently receive more information and guidance on their diets best suited for them. So the most frequently used service for Village is transportation. This is a vital service because many seniors may be very healthy, but because of vision or lower extremity issues or other mobility issues, many seniors have either given up driving or don't want to drive outside of their immediate neighborhoods. You know, maybe they'll go 5 minutes away to the grocery store, but they don't want to go 45 minutes away to a medical provider that they are using. So having readily available transportation can mean that a person is able to see their healthcare providers more frequently, leading to better health and wellness. Dental appointments being a case in point that are of utmost importance, as dentition impacts the variety of food a person may eat. Another barrier to healthy eating for seniors, and that villages can help address, is social isolation. Social isolation diminishes appetite and the desire to cook nutritionally balanced meals. As Rose mentioned, the tea and toast syndrome. Most villages host a myriad of social events, often with food, social events help improve outlook and mood. Through these events, people meet peers in their neighborhood and may find meal companions. In our village, we have 3 women who are over 100 who have started to have lunch together. But before going into a few examples of how villages, and my village has helped people with some of these issues, I also should mention the limitations of villages. Villages aren't social service agencies, and they can't provide, there's a lot of services they can't provide. They can't provide anything that requires a license. So as a volunteer for my village, when I'm in that role as a volunteer, I can't provide individual nutrition counseling. However, I can assist with general nutrition advice within the scope of the state licensing regulations, and I can be on that resource list of vetted providers along with other dietitians. My village, and I think others as well, does not provide transportation to anyone in a wheelchair. Walkers, canes, yes, and our volunteers are trained how to deal with those types of mobility devices. Villages don't become involved in people's finances, and there can be limitations to the services that can be provided for someone that has multiple needs. Some villages have grants or funds for case managers for these types of cases. So I'm going to give a few examples of my experiences helping people with shopping and food prep. So I'll start with Helen. Helen, in her 90s, was completely bedridden from a fall she'd suffered quite a few years ago. She had aides to help her 24/7. There was always somebody in her house with her. She had 2 adult children living in the area, both working full-time, and they stopped in on weekends and would bring some food over. However, weekly grocery shopping by the village assured that the aides had ingredients for cooking meals for her and relieved her children of that responsibility and worry. She loved to talk, Helen, and enjoyed the visits when I and others brought over groceries. So Helen had resources. She could pay for those aides and she had family support, but the village provided a really valuable service for her. So then there's Norm. Norm was a widower in his 80s. Most of his family did not live in the area and were not available. He was diagnosed with cancer and was in a rehab hospital for about 6 months. However, he ran out of funds and the hospital put a lien on his home. He checked himself out, went home, and called the village. So what do we do? And Norm, he needed help with transportation. He was actually also illiterate, which threw a few wrinkles into things. And since he'd been away from his home and had been ill, his home had fallen to some disrepair, had an insect infestation, and needed a good cleaning. The village was able to provide help for these issues. He used a walker, but he could shop for himself. So instead of someone going and doing his grocery shopping for him, volunteers took him to the store when I was one of those volunteers. And he loved using the motorized cart in the store. And and then he sort of shopped for himself. But taking him home, putting his groceries away for him, this team was also then able to observe his kitchen. We were able to observe he had expired food, how clean it was. So sort of a checkup on how things were being kept. And as is often is the case, Norm also enjoyed it if a volunteer stayed and chatted for a bit. So another opportunity again for a social visit. So, so Norm did not have resources. He needed a lot of help, and his family was not close by. So let's go on to Jeff, my last little example of how a village can help. Jeff was diagnosed with a debilitating and progressive neuromuscular disease in middle age. And he was middle-aged. I mean, he is middle-aged as a village member. So not everyone's a senior. His wife is a teacher. He has 2 teenage children. He's homebound and alone during the day. Jeff can use a walker, but he has very limited mobility. His overburdened and stressed wife asked if the village could organize volunteers to provide 1 meal per week for the family. Jeff can only eat soft food because of his condition, but with guidance, village volunteers provided this valuable service to the household. The village also helped the family with transportation to medical visits and helped to build a ramp to the front door. The disease makes it difficult for Jeff to speak, so social visits are difficult for him, but he loves music. So his wife asked if there were any music-loving volunteers who could come over and listen to music with him. Not only did this work very well, but one of the volunteers became a close friend and a baseball watching companion with him as well. So these are just 3 examples of sort of the I'd say different kinds of situations that villages may encounter, and how just small things like transportation, helping people get access to food, helping people with some simple meal preparation. Another thing Jeff's wife asked for at one point in time was someone to come in on the weekends and help her chop vegetables and get food prep ready for the meals for the week. And I went and did that with her, and it was great fun. She taught me a few things, actually. So, so in summary, I hope you may check out whether there is a village or similar organization in your community, and consider volunteering. Or if you have a family member or a neighbor that you think could benefit from the services of a village and may improve their health and wellness, that you would look into the village network. So thank you. And I guess we have time for some questions, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
It is 7:30, but I think we do have some questions. So we'll just, why don't, hopefully people can stay and we can address these. Well, I hope everybody learned a lot. I'm not sure if it was what you expected of our overall presentation, but this is, certainly I learned a lot from Paulette and Sheryl. So I'm just going to go to the questions. There are not really too many of them, but the first one is something I think probably a lot of us face, and it's somebody who, as almost everybody on here are women. So most of us are more privileged with our food situation and nutrition situation. And a lot of us, as we age, weigh more than we would like to. And so one of the first questions was, how can I weigh less at 75? Nothing seems to work. Who wants to tackle that one? I mean, I have a few thoughts myself, because I'm overweight myself. I'd like to weigh a little less myself. I recently have been somewhat successful losing weight, but it's very difficult as we age, from so many reasons cause us to be more overweight, a loss of lean muscle mass, hormonal changes, the postmenopausal thing going on. We just can't eat what we did when we were 27. I think different things work for different people. I think you have to take a good hard look. I know for me, I know exactly where my excess calories come from, which less so now, is wine, alcohol, and sometimes sweets. I love chocolate. So it's really kind of getting a handle for me. It was really drinking less wine, and I actually discovered alcohol removed wine, which was actually a fermented product, and it's just been centrifuged, so the alcohol is spun out. It's actually a low calorie product, and while it's not quite as good as real wine, it certainly does in a pinch, and it's perfectly fine. And I discovered alternatives, non-alcoholic alternatives, to have something special to drink at the end of the day. That and really getting a grip on your added sugar intake, and just actually eating more vegetables. For me, I really try to make sure that there's vegetables in every meal, and really, either that, it is also adding some, I started a balance, strength, and flexibility class on Zoom a couple times a week, trying to build my muscle mass, and just looking at some of my overall patterns. And so it's everybody, we're all kind of in the same boat together with that. And so I think I was actually able to lose 14 pounds over the last couple of months, by being a little bit more mindful of those types of things. I don't know if Sheryl and Paulette, you have other bits of advice, or anyone else in the audience might have something to share.
No, I think those are all really, really good tips, Rose. I think we all need to, I like to tell people that I work with to kind of think like a detective and really be analytical about what you're doing. You may not realize that you've really cut back on some of the activity, and I think activity is so important. And as you rightly mentioned, rebuilding muscle mass can be
Yeah.
so critical because that helps to burn calories. But I think, if you just do it, keep track on a calendar and just see, maybe you're not walking as much as you used to. And sometimes as we age, we have limitations. Maybe we can't do the activities that we used to. I was playing tennis and took a big fall. And so I have to give that up. I don't want to risk getting hurt again. And so I'm focusing more on the things I can do rather than looking back and saying, oh, shoot, I really loved all the years I was able to do that activity. So now I'm swimming more often and trying to walk more. So I think, just really being critical with yourself and saying, that extra cookie that you pick up, that extra piece of chocolate, that extra glass of wine, that really does add up. And, our metabolisms are slower. When I did my plate, to maintain my weight, I need less calories than I used to. So if I want to lose weight, I have to work even harder. So I think those are just the things we're up against. And as you mentioned the hormones too. There's so many things that impact us. But yeah.
Right. And yeah,
And
being conscious. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's good. No, I was just gonna say that I think the other thing, and I agree with everything you guys have said, is to look at not only fitness, but the health indicators. I know that weight is the concern, and it's great to lose weight, but also if the blood pressure is good and cholesterol is good and those things, that you're doing a lot of good. And then it is just a matter of maybe a little bit more exercise, a few cutting back on portions, I think to me is like really where it's at to lose weight.
I think you can also take a look, be conscious of your non-exercise physical activity and try to ramp that up. Walking around, instead of sending your partner or husband down to get the laundry, you go. Just all of those things really, really do add up. And I agree with Paulette on knowing your numbers. As long as you're functional, can get up off the floor from sitting down or something, as long as you're feeling good and you can do what you need to do. Sometimes I think we have to adjust our mindset. What does it mean? Are you 5 pounds over your ideal weight, or are you 55 pounds over? I mean, it's sort of coming to terms with it sometimes but it can be frustrating.
Right. And I think also just being more accepting. I mean, we can't look like what we did when we were what did you say, Rose, 27? We are older, and just being more accepting of who we are and where we are, you know, and count the blessings. I don't think
Right,
we
right.
talked about gratitude, but talking about, you know, what we do have instead of what we don't have. I think if every day we contemplate that, we'll be a lot happier too. And we do know that when people are happy, they do age better too.
Somebody asked about how do we balance leafy greens with recent news that greens risk contamination? Full disclosure, I'm not giving them up. I would just like to know how to address concerns. And I haven't really, other than various food safety concerns that crop up occasionally with greens, that are usually related to field sanitation or things like that. I'm not sure if somebody wants to clarify that. Is Valerie, do you want to unmute yourself and tell us a little bit more about your question?
Hey there, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Mhm.
so apparently there's issues about water running off that has bad stuff in it that's contaminating greens. Like you, I work for a big supermarket, and there's just been some issues, and I almost think we're going to die from anxiety rather than over worrying whether or not our tap water is safe and we have to filter everything, and whether or not I just, I don't know what to say to people who seem very anxious about these issues.
Oh, that's a good one, Valerie. And you work for a supermarket chain? Yeah, I used to have to handle these kinds of issues, and I think there is such, now I saw in the time that I worked in the industry, such a shift from people asking about nutrition and how to lower cholesterol and that type of thing to food sources and food safety and where does food come from and what is in food. And those are really difficult issues lots of times. And I think, as far as contamination, well, you know, washing food, cooking food, it does kill germs. It does kill bacteria. That might not be such an easy thing to say about leafy greens, but if that's really an issue, that's one way to do it is to have leafy greens that you can cook. So there is a lot of concern about now, which is not a bad thing, but it's I would say a more complex types of issues as to where food is sourced. And sometimes you really have to dig deep to answer people's questions.
I often feel that the leafy greens at my local farm market are a little bit safer because I know that they grow like their arugula and their salad greens inside. So it seems a little bit more controlled to me. And I think, I think we just gonna all do the best we can in terms of washing. Oh, I do not wash packaged, like if I buy a plastic punnet of baby spinach or something, I don't wash it. It says it's triple washed, and I just kind of live on the edge and trust it's gonna be okay.
That's a good point. I was a giant during the spinach recall. People have that day was someday, and one of the reasons an FDA was did provide this information is that when you buy a head of lettuce or a discrete, not cut up and shredded and packaged, where it comes from all sorts of different heads of lettuce, your risk is less. And certainly the spread of the contamination is less. And yes, I think you're right, therefore, Rose, too, that when you buy from your local market or your local farmer's market, right where it came from. And it is more of a discrete entity than the packages that have lettuce and product from all sorts of fields and all sorts of put together.
Yeah, I agree with buying locally. I think that's really, if we can do that, if you can afford that, something about looking that farmer eye to eye, is encouraging.
Mhm.
I'm looking at one that I want to go ahead and address in the chat box. That says, Mary, I'm noticing that the MIND diet has very little calcium-rich foods, and bone health as an issue for aging. So remember in my talk, I said about overlaying the MIND principles over the My Plate. So the goal is still 3 servings of dairy, low fat, no fat dairy. So you would be getting the calcium there as well. So, and some of the vegetables we know, excuse me, have calcium too. So that's a very good question.
Yeah, it
But
is hard. I think it's very hard, especially if you don't eat dairy. I do eat dairy. I mean, I'm sure I get probably most of my calcium in the morning from the milk I put in my coffee and yogurt and things like that. But I think if you don't consume dairy products and you or fortified non-dairy milks, and I'm honestly not crazy about non-dairy milks because they are very low in protein generally, and almost like drinking water, just been fortified with some vitamins and minerals. And also some of them have a lot of added sugars because otherwise but then you may need to consider calcium supplements. Get those DEXA scans and know your own bone situation as well. It's
And I
helpful.
love to recommend canned salmon, and then making sure that you mash up the bones and you include that when you're making a salmon patty or putting salmon on your salad, or that's a good place to get some extra calcium too.
Mhm.
Right.
I don't know how much more time you have. Somebody asked about how do you incorporate gluten-free, if you're a gluten-free eating style in the MIND diet. And I want to say, I mean, there are gluten-free. So the whole gluten-free thing, we don't have enough time to really get into that here, but the gluten-free grains include rice. Most oats for most people, if don't have celiac disease, I don't think you really have to worry about cross-contaminated oats. There's quinoa, which isn't so much of a grain as a seed, but still people treat it like a grain. And there's just other complex carbs like potatoes, sweet potatoes, or gold potatoes, and beans. So there are just other types of grain foods that you can incorporate, or complex carbohydrate foods that contain similar nutrients like fiber and different minerals and things that and grains are an important source of protein as well. So I don't want to forget that. So I'm not sure if that helps address your question for gluten-free. Gluten is a protein. It is not a carbohydrate. So just want to make sure people understand that. Let's see, other issues here. What kinds of fish are recommended? And I think it's like any kind of fish. I mean, fatty fish are great, but any kind of fish. Let's see. Oh, somebody suggests seltzer water with bitters and lemon as a refreshing replacement for the 5 o'clock glass of wine while cooking.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I like that. I was really hooked on San Pellegrino Mementis, which are, I don't like artificial sweeteners, and so Mementis had a little bit of juice and seltzer water. Tasted great, had like 35 calories, but they stopped making them recently. So I'm gonna have to find something else that falls into the same kind of category. So let's see. I think that's about all the questions. Does anybody want to unmute themselves and ask one more question, or have any burning question they'd like to ask? Are we all good?
I just want to
If
thank you.
not,
I thought it was a great presentation. I learned a lot, so thank you very much.
Oh, I think it's Danielle.
and Rose, if you don't mind, I'll close out our meeting. I'd like to thank you all for sharing with us how to nourish ourselves and our loved ones for a brighter future. Check the homepage of laydowndc.org for links to register for upcoming public events, such as Love Your Local Grains at the Hill Center in Washington, D.C. on March 23rd, and Save the date, June 3rd, for a grand gala fundraiser at La Maison Française at the French Embassy here in Washington, D.C. More details are coming soon. Thank you all for joining us and have a pleasant evening. Thank you. Bye for now.